that this past year has changed or maybe consolidated the vision of the office. Probably it had been under different search before, but I think that one very specific moment was super important, and that was right before COVID. COVID just made it even clearer, which was International Women's Day last year. That was March the 8th on 2020. In Mexico, things in the feminist movements were escalating since the November before. So November 2019, there were a lot of protests against the violence towards women, and basically protesting because of the lack of response from the government, which posed itself as a government that would work for those marginalized, which it's obviously not doing. Is a more populist government than anything else. Well, it's a populist government, nothing else. And the issue got even a worse response, and so then the movement escalated, because it was obvious that the things that these groups were demanding were not just obvious, were urgent, no? And still are, and every day they become even more urgent. And why? Because the discrimination towards women in Mexico has gone so far as to create a huge problem with feminicides. So it is really an urgent matter that is not only for the sake of equality, but is for the safety of half of the population of the country. And so for me was in parallel the thought of thinking on how the space creates gender discrimination. Until I have been always developing studios at schools, research, proposing ideas behind housing, which I'm going to explain, thinking on how to erase potential spaces of discrimination. So I thought I was called to do a lecture on March the 8th, 2020, at a conference only held by women architects in Oaxaca about my work. But I decided not to be kind of more proactive in terms of showing how my architecture could open channels for erasing discrimination. And to my surprise, literally, I couldn't not only find those projects within my portfolio, but I found those who remarked and reiterated discrimination issues. So in that lecture, I analyzed every project and why I failed to provide any alternatives to the system. And I declared myself guilty, but I also promised to be much more aware on that side. So I also learned through this year, and I've heard it from Maria Giudici Cerezade, that we are all victims and victimized in this system, because it's a system that needs discrimination to perpetuate, to exist, rather than perpetuate, no? So, but then understanding that we are all victims and we are all victimaries, I position myself on the side of the victimary and on the side of the victim, understanding where I could take the two visions to then act. And I think it's been immensely productive, especially because the platform that COVID has posed to us, all the difficulties and all the problematics around the built environment have been exposed much more clearly. No, so for me, has only been a process of even more self-reflection, but of even a more productive process of continuation on the design. And how did I understood that I've been promoting the discrimination system is by doing housing and without questioning the configuration of a house. by building spaces that do allow probably of diversity of thinking, but are never putting care and domestic labor in the center of things, in the core, and allowing then women to be able to emancipate from those burdens. But I also think that by doing so, we are perpetuating a system that not only discriminates, that damages the environment in its whole, because not being able to take care of the other us, of the other human, then it's impossible to think that we can take care of the environment we live in. But I also at that time declared myself in full energy to work towards the possibility of creating platforms that would allow these things to erase and to create a seed on that. I also know and understand, I'm not that innocent to know that architecture cannot change it all, but I do believe that each of us can do things. I agree completely that architecture has no power to change society, but I do absolutely believe that can become a platform for society to change. And I prefer to be on that side, on thinking that we could do a lot of things and probably we change very few, but with that very few changes, we can potentially, if we all do them, change it in full. And we have been really working to try to integrate many aspects of life within our project. And I think that never before we have centered our architecture towards the human and the understanding and the potentiality of the relationship of the body and its purpose towards the environment than before. And I think that is then necessary to start understanding the configuration of the house. And obviously, it is one of the most contested structure, or the most contested structure that defines our life. And it's obviously politically, culturally, socially, economically hypercharged. But the problem is that it truly defines our existence. So it's one or the only type, and this is also referring to Maria Giudice Ceresade again, that is the only type that produces subjectivity. No? So it is directing the way we live. It is truly defining how we are intended to configure our being and our social being in Earth. So, and for me, even the most dangerous part of it is that these conventions have been embedded in the law of many countries. So, in my country, housing is a constitutional right, and to define what is that every citizen has the right to have a dignified and enjoyable housing. These the characteristics of dignified and enjoyable housing are being described by the law, and this is a house that is defined as the minimum space that is really kind of allowing someone's life. But the unfortunate is that the minimum has become not only the precept on how people should live, but also the maximum. And this is defined as a house that needs to have at minimum 43 square meters, 400 square feet, more or less, with a definition that also kind of absolutely discriminates in everyone but the nuclear patriarchal family, heteropatriarchal family. No, so it's a house that it's composed by a kitchen and a bathroom and two rooms, one larger, one smaller, and a living space. And if it's not like that, it's not defined as a house. And then this is sold as the enjoyable, dignified space to live. and it's literally sold to people. So it's not only creating a burden towards society for its configuration, but it's also creating a huge burden for people to be to need to produce money in order to exist in this space. So this dignified, enjoyable space is the dog biting its tail, right? So it's producing all the things that wants to avoid, and it is a system that it's a worldwide problematic, that it's eliminating the possibility of each of us to exist in the world. So I would say that I need, or I want to think that architecture could become this platform for living, but for the understanding of each person's living. And we come from a century that tried to search for a collective solution for giving the same opportunities and equal spaces to everybody in the planet. And I completely agree that one of the important bases to build a society is democracy and equality, which was what the values we pursued in the 20th century. Nevertheless, we haven't achieved them. But the thing is that how to implement those and how to massively translate them into the territory became in an homogenization and an standardization that has created a precedent on how the whole world has to live. And this has arise all the problems. So I would say that we have a very big challenge right now in order to understand how to create a society that is built on the basis of democracy and equality, but allows for those differences to exist. So that allows diversity to be part of the equation, allows anyone in the planet to create their own existence. And this is something that I think architecture also can start to become part of this discussion, no? Because I think right now we have been tools of perpetuating this system by thinking, how can we design these boxes where we box people better? We are perpetuating the system, because if we have a magic wand and we are able to give everyone the same house and the same enjoyable house, this is not going to allow anyone to have a dignified life, because the system won't allow to be all of us emancipated. So why? Because we live in a capitalist world where domestic labor is not paid, is not remunerated. And domestic labor is the only most important labor of all, because without it, we don't exist. We're not self-sufficient organisms. We need the other to exist. So we need someone to take care of us since we're born till we die, in order to exist, in order to produce. The problem right now is that in order to take care of us, we need to produce to then exist. So this is the problem, and the houses that we're producing are not allowing that labor to exist in a sustainable way. And what do I mean with it? By individualizing the house and by idealizing the life of the family, of the new heteropatriarchal nuclear family in one structure, we are preventing the opportunity of society to create domestic labor that is sustainable, collectively done, because it needs to be done by many, and then to be able to exist and then to produce. So I believe that then architecture needs to start to disgregate and disseminate all those all those conventions that are constructed in our minds, in order to integrate the possibility of opening channels for a more sustainable place in society. And I decided that I needed to start thinking on the relationship of the body and the space. And this I learned because I'm doing a monastery in Germany, and how I have totally understood the importance of first of all, the monks have understood that they have to create a sustainable base for their existence in order to allow them to live their spiritual life. So for me, it's the same. How can we create the system that allows us to exist, to take care of us, to physically exist, in order to live the life that we each of us want to live, the spiritual, the productive, the, you tell me, no? And but I think that we have been working the other way around, and the monks have understood that the first expression of their spiritual life is the body, and the first protector of that spiritual life is the body. Therefore, this body needs to have a first very important protection and expression, which is the rope. The second one is the relationship of the body with their intimate space, the cell. And then is the body and the self in relationship with the other. So this is the cloister. And then the relationship within the other in their community, in his equal, with the others that not only are part of the monastery but are part of the community around the monastery. And this is a system of determination that is not only allowing the possibility of this spiritual life to happen because of the understanding of the necessity of taking care of the body, but also of the possibility of the scaled notion of relationships that also work within space but within time. So if you see the day of a monk, it's perfectly responding to that ritualistic life, that also the ritual is allowing them to exist in their spiritual life. And I'm not saying we should become monks, and I'm not saying monks are the ideal spaces or monasteries or anything like that. I'm just saying that there are very interesting notions that we could extract from it in order to translate them in creating a more whole understanding of the necessity of a human being into the built environment. So I really been thinking how to start thinking on the relationship from the body to the space and to the other, no, and how to establish that possibility of those relationships in order to create more sustained communities, and understanding the house from another lens and opening the eyes towards disseminating the notion of the composed conventional house defined by a room, two rooms, and a bathroom, and a bedroom, and a kitchen, and probably understanding each of those spaces, no? Because definitely, I think that we all need to sleep, but we don't all need to sleep in a bed in the same way, no? We all are social beings and have relationship with others, no? We have different types of relationships, intimate relationships with other, blood relationships with others, and etc., no? But not necessarily we need to live with that other or share the bed to that extent, or a bed. I mean, can you ask a Mayan person if they really prefer to sleep in a bed? The majority say no, they cannot imagine sleeping in a bed. So, but we're building houses that you could only sleep in beds, but the Mayan people sleep in hammocks. How how can we integrate those notions, no? So definitely I think that the notion of resting, of nurturing our body, and the intimate moment that this creates is very important to all of us, but not that all of us need to do it the same, no? And the same, I think, with the representative space that the room means, no? So to some of us, it's just a cell to sleep, and it could be anything. But to some of us, it represents the place where we can build our own identity, where we can be comfortable with our own selves. So all the spectrum is not able to fit in the four walls and the bed that we define. How can we then open channels for more possibilities to happen? No, we have been designing a lot of spaces that are sole sleeping rooms scattered around, or that really are creating a series of relationships in interiorly that escalate in different ways. No, then how to think of the bathroom. The bathroom is this place where we are able to um, wash ourselves, and definitely, and I don't think no one can disagree in the fact that we have developed the incredible technology to, some of us have the great opportunity to have a toilet and a running water to wash ourselves, no, because it's super comfortable. But who said we need to box them? And some in and every, almost every building code in the world is allowed to have this space that has no natural ventilation and no natural illumination. Why did we lost the opportunity of having a space that is truly for the understanding of the care of our body, that sometimes, yes, is made intimately, but sometimes this could create potentially incredible connections, no? The ritual of bathing has been lost. Basically, the bathroom has become uh, that only functional space that doesn't allow us to connect with the of us being taking care of our body physically, no, of ourselves, of being cleaned. Can we think that there is a notion of the possibility of sharing other aspects of this, or can we think that this space really enacts as a space for the body to be able to understand the importance of this ritual to exist and happen? And I mean, now I come into the most contested space of the house, which is the kitchen, no? When did we decided that mechanization for the kitchen was the answer? No, I mean, it's for eliminating the burdens of domestic labor. Well, the burden of domestic labor is what keeps us alive, and also the ritual of eating allow us to for many things. And by systematizing the kitchen, we are just eliminating the possibility of erasing discrimination in its full. We all do have to eat, but why do we all have to cook? And especially, why have we relegated to any human being the fact that this is something they have to do? Let's speak again. We have a magic wand and the world became equal with the current system, and that women and men share domestic labor. Right now is not the case, and 95% of women do take care of domestic labor. But let's think that we arrived to that day that it's 50-50. Well, someone is discriminated because that is a job that is not paid. And if it's paid, it's very precariously paid. So if we think that there is only this binary of doing it as just a job that you need to do in order to exist, or have to pay for it, then we are really not allowing the society to change. Can we think that this is a collective social act that is done by a series of people that are taking care of the society, as well as we are taking care in the meantime for other parts of the society? I think it does. Let's think also on the ritualistic aspect, no? By exposing the kitchen to the living space, the argument was we integrate domestic labor into the family. Well, we erased the possibility of it to become a ritual, because who wants to cook a sauce in this kitchen? I mean, and then sleep with the chili sauce on your head, because you cannot cook something so spicy or so rich as we do in our cultures in a kitchen like this, if you don't, end up sleeping with the whole house smelling the same, no? And we learned this a lot when we were working in the reconstruction of the earthquake, and we were thinking of how to be able to allow anyone to exist with their own definition of kitchen. But what we really saw is that the kitchen is never a space that is linked to the living space. Those are two different acts. One is cooking, and normally is done collectively and outside. Of course, this is because of the weather. But the other thing is that the notion of cooking as a mere nutritional act, functional act, is completely erased in these communities. That doesn't exist. It is a ritual, obviously, that serves the purpose of nurturing, but nurturing in many ways. So physically, but also socially. So it's an act that is done collectively, and it's shared probably even more intimately than how it's done. We have experimented with the possibility of the kitchen in many ways. And we have thought that the kitchen has created an impossibility, especially in these communities. And when we designed a house that it was Vivienda Popular, we were already questioning the notion of the kitchen. Is the kitchen needing to be connected to the living space? Well, it does for the law, because if it doesn't, then the house is not qualifying as a house. So we were trying to create a design strategy which is modular to be able to allow the inhabitant to create their own possibility of the kitchen. Whether if the kitchen can be totally separated, becomes a productive space that is related to cooking, or not, maybe it's just a productive space, and or because they normally cook and eat with the other family members, or maybe it truly becomes an integrated part of the house, allowing for more rooms to exist. And when these models were built, definitely we proved that this was true. No, and for example, this guy decided to use his space for a productive space, versus this woman that decided that the space needed to be open in order to integrate with the family. No, so we have already thought of the possibilities of the kitchen as a kitchen that could not only exist differently depending the situation of the day and the moment, but also could travel with you. And we were asked to design the kitchen of the future in 2014. And we were already thinking that these pieces needed to become furniture or objects as your favorite book or your favorite couch. So you could take them anywhere. No, more and more that we have the impossibility of buying a piece of property, we have to move. We also like to move in this world. So for me, my kitchen is one of my favorite spaces and a very special place. I think that it's really difficult that now I have to move and leave my kitchen behind. And why is the kitchen has to be stuck to the space, right? So we were already then starting to question that notion. And why does it has to be either stuck or be collective or be out? So in this house, we implemented that kitchen. So this kitchen is movable, no? So this is living space, and it can be rearranged wherever, or the kitchen can be taken out into the terrace to have the possibility of that. And so then how to question the whole living environment, no, and how to start understanding to create a possibility of a space that becomes the platform for the existence of the other, and not the imposition of a life that truly it almost never exists. So we were asked to do a project for a complex named Solo Houses in Spain, and there we were really having difficulties because we never had a person to dialogue with, and we normally like to dialogue with people. But specifically in this project, I understood that even though we like to dialogue with the inhabitants of the place, and I always try to imagine to become that other to design, I realized that I'm never that other. So let's be just honest that even if you create a dialogue, which is very productive, I'm not, and as I said in the beginning, I'm not going to change it for anything, not for Zoom, but not for anything else. I think that the necessity of really being honest on the fact that we're never going to become that other, and then how to force us to then design with that condition on in the table, to really allow this architecture to be inhabited by that other that has probably a totally different idea, no? So in this case, we created some structures that they don't have labels, so they're not a bathroom and a room, they're just structures. They have the same proportions, they're just different, aesthetically defined, very different. And a little bit of exploration here was a critique on the modernist house that has very descriptive spaces, very wide, very equal, very homogeneous, but descripted by size and by function, and then per se by size. So we decided to here say, okay, so on the contrary, they have a very specific aesthetic definition, that it's our imprint on the place, but there has no definition. So these modules could be anything, or could be living spaces, or could be sculptures, or could be places for a huge group of people, but for also just a self, or for a family, or for whatever, no? And each of these structures, depending on each of the persons, can be interpreted as one structure, the whole thing, the whole living cell, or all of them making a compound that is one living entity. So we struggle even how to create the expression on that, and I'm not going to go in why we are always searching for a different way of expressing our projects. But in this case, it was important that we never show a plan where we are saying this is a kitchen, because we don't want to direct anyone to use a space in a specific way. So in this case, we were searching if this was a good way, doing drawings that are plans and sections and elevations at the same time, but also they can be folded, so they're models, and they were effective. They proved the officials understood them, and and the house was approved, although it hasn't been built. And evolving this thought, we were able to develop another project afterwards. And this was in Germany. This is in Germany, near the Lake Edersee. And the beauty of this project is that we were challenged to think on the new ways of life. And the new ways of life for these for the brief that we were called, were those of working and living in the same space. Note, this is 2017, pre-pandemic, but obviously society was already going there. But for me, it was really strange that they were calling them new ways of life. No, for me, as society, we have been living and working in the same space since ever, since the existence of humanity. First of all, I believe the domestic environment, because all what I've said, is the most important working environment, because the most important labor in life is care and reproductive labor. And second of all, just that division has just happened very recently ago, 200 years ago, and in very few spaces, no, because in the rural environment, in the whole world today, is still the same. No, living and working is in the same, is done in the same space. So for me, it was a little tricky. And what since the beginning, and they were asking for a space that would have 2 rooms and a kitchen and a living area and a working space. No, and how does that look? And we thought, well, for us, this is first of all not new, and second of all, not thinking on life as a whole. So we were thinking of ways of life, and we were thinking more on understanding how to create spaces that promote different activities and different emotions, and not label against spaces, but be a little bit more specific. So we created this chart, and we kind of in between the team, we were defining with these little drawings what those spaces mean. No, a space for bathing, cleaning, with laughter. So how we would define it. So from this chart, we took at 6 of the most interesting spaces we wanted to promote in our house, and we collaged them each, and then with these collages, we were defining what is the definition of the space, the experience of the space, and what is the relationship of the space with the terrain, with the light, with its materiality, with its walls, with its openings. And then when we collaged all those 6 ones, we created one big collage and we traced it. Then there we had a problem. We were in kind of exploring a new method of design, and we arrived here and we're like, okay, now what? We translated then this into space, and as we were developing the house and arriving to the conclusion of the house, I thought that really we were going to we were creating just a regular space, right? We could have started with the notion of 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, 1 bedroom, 1 kitchen, and arrived to the same volumetric definition. And I always stayed in my mind for 2 years with that notion that, okay, this was a start. This is already a process of trying to search for something different, but we probably could do better. And to my surprise, a year ago, a couple of retired Germans decided that they wanted to build this house, and to my biggest surprise, they called me and they said, okay, we have seen the design, we have talked to Christoph Hesse, who was the one initiating this, and Nash Baita, and we have decided that we want to use this house. And they started describing, and they really started telling me how they interpreted the space, and they interpreted the space in a completely different way on what I did. No, what I thought for me was a space that promoted a more collective relationship in the unit. For them, was the most intimate space. And what I thought it was probably where I would have put the kitchen, they decided to put the office. And it was really interesting how this notion of the interpretation was able to exist because of the openness of the programmatic decision. So instead of creating an imposition and then obviously the people do the intervention and transform the possibility of living, no, and create their own existence, we were already giving the basis for that, no. And I think that we have explored that in many ways, but I think we never had pushed to really become a platform for a new possibility, no. And we started with Acuña and with the model of the house that I already described. But I think that where we really learned many things, and I already said it, it was with the reconstruction of the earthquake. So what we did here is we were only kind of helping the families to rebuild their houses with our technical knowledge. In this case, we were really allowing their own notion of living to exist with just tools of safety and of structural safety and different advices on design, on local materials, etc., that could allow them to build better. But these are never our designs, and we learn here the importance of the social production of habitat, the importance of the notion of the understanding of the architect as becoming one of those tools for the world to exist, for the space to exist. I heard Elizabeth Rathern, the lady that wrote this book, Economy of the Donut, and I think that, and she was saying that economy is so important. In why do we leave it to economists? Well, I thought exactly the same with architecture. Yeah, architecture is so important. Really, can we be so naive to think that only architects should do it? I think that we should become part of a system that builds architecture, no? And I think this is what we did here, and I think that the possibility of the creation of knowledge lasts much more than architecture. Even architecture lasts more than us, but the creation of knowledge lasts even more. So if we take the opportunity of architecture to also be a channel for production of knowledge, then we really are creating sustainable possibilities for humans to exist in humanity, no? And we have been trying to do that with many projects, no? To maybe combine the idea of the just being kind of a strategy, no, like this one, which is a modular strategy, modules that can be rearranged in many different ways, that can create different arrangements of expanded families, of communities, or single units, no, that potentiate relationships, but also the possibility, no, of the understanding of the allowing diversity. And this is something we did in this project in Territorio de Gigantes, by bringing also more architects to the table, no? So also in the beginning you were presenting me and saying how the studio promotes collaboration. It's promoting collaboration. Is I think myself many systems to be able to detonate together with others the possibility for many. And I think that this project is part of that thinking. It needs to be taken further, but I think that it's about creating an homogeneous basis, an equal basis of existence, and then being able to allow the individual to exist on it. And this, we have been exploring how to do it in the vertical realm as well, and exploring the possibilities of creating nucleus of relationships that would have to scale the notion of collective living, like this one in Monterrey, that we created a 150 unit building that has very different social interactive spaces that are combined with the domestic spaces that are intending to allow relationships to be formed within the binary of public and private, of individual and collective, of domesticity and productivity. So how to create spaces that are in between those, no? And how then, with that, being able to understand the importance and the necessity of taking care of the environment. And I'm going to just very quickly extend, kind of the notion that I've been saying towards the end, of saying that I believe that if we understand, first of all, that we need the other to exist, and therefore the care of that other allows our own existence to be on Earth, we are going to be able to extend that notion to the understanding that, first of all, we need nature to exist, but not that, we are nature. And if we don't take care of each other, we will never be able to take care of nature around us. And I think that architecture could also potentiate those possibilities, no? And for example, I think one of the most, for me, shocking and determining programs is an aquarium, and we were asked to do one. And I must say that I was totally recluded to do one until I was able to understand the potentiality of the space to become that place where we could understand how to take care of that life that we don't see, we're not able to enter, and therefore we are just able to dream of and fantasize by the spaces that are right now doing that job. So I was able to create a project with the clients on the understanding that this is a building, that it's a ruin that was flooded and then was invaded by nature. And then we arrived, open channels for humans to understand how nature just evolved in this place. So basically, it's a platform that promotes nature to exist in this place, not naturally, obviously, artificially, to take over the place. Artificially meaning that this is a building, no, it's not Earth. but naturally, because we're not doing anything to prevent nature to exist, normally what we do in the built environment is prevent nature to get in. In this case, it's in Mazatlan, which is a very tropical environment that nature just exists, and we're not banning it from the building. In the other way, we are just allowing humans to interact with it. It has become the Sea of Cortez, which is the sea that is next to the building, research center, and a place where people really can understand the dominative nature of nature, and hopefully to allow humans to understand that we are part of the system. And this is the ruin is under construction, and hopefully sometime soon nature is able to take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. Sensitivity to nature, human design.
Wait, Jared, we cannot hear you.
You can't. Can you hear me?
Now we do, yeah.
I was just raving about everything I liked about that. But again, thank you so much for that. So we're gonna move towards the question and answer session. And one thing we're trying to do is to break down a lot of the barriers between us asking questions and just barriers to conversation through Zoom. So what we're going to try is if you would like to respond to something that's being talked about currently, or if you would like to continue a conversation, just write the word stack in the chat. And then once someone's finished with their thought, you can come in and we'll go to the next person on stack. And that way we can just continue a conversation. If you would like to ask your own question, feel free to just drop the question in the chat and we will work that in with a lot of the pre-made questions from the student pre-sessions. So again, if you want to continue talking about a topic and you want to respond to something or something, just write the word Slack in the chat. And going forward from that, I think we should get to introducing the panelists.
Muchas gracias, Tatiana. It was great. Wow.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. Well, now we can start by introducing the panelists.
Thank you so much for that lecture. That was really great. Like, wow. I'm Adriana Hinojosa. I'm from the graduating class of 2020, and I'm from Venezuela.
Hi, I am Arias Salomon. I graduated in 2019, and I am from Mexico.
Hi, I'm Susana Chinchilla. I graduated in May 2020, and I'm from Bogota, Colombia.
Hello, I'm Victoria Jaime. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm a fifth-year architecture student.
Hi, I'm Mariana Bravo Rivera. I'm currently a third-year student in architecture at Pratt, and I'm from Venezuela.
Hello, I'm Rafa Swerdwin, originally from, well, I'm from Chicago, but originally from Mexico, and I'm a second-year student.
Hi, I'm Vera Liz Paredes. I'm Dominican and a fourth-year student.
Hi, I'm Guillermo Garza. I'm a second-year student, and I'm from Mexico.
Okay, so thank you, Tatiana, for offering all of this thinking around the home, which I think today more than ever is so present in our lives. So I would like to start the conversation asking you to talk a little bit more about your background. So being a woman and growing up in Mexico, which is a country of little resources and also a country with a deep ingrained machista thinking, like you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation. So what has been some of your obstacles along the way, along your career, and how has your background influenced the way you think, influenced your philosophy around design? This is a question that can be answered as you as a designer and as you as a leader, both and as a human, how you relate to people, to your collaborators, to your work, the people that work in your studio, etc.
So yeah, I have to say that I unfortunately and fortunately, I mean, depends on the lens where you see it. I feel very bad answering this question, because for me, being a woman has not only not been a difficulty, has been an extreme opportunity, because I live in such a privileged place that where the understanding of equality is already something that is a precept, which, as I said, is only in very privileged environments happening. The necessity of then having a women's voice is very important and very imperant. And so therefore, for me, being one of the few in the beginning women's of there, it only represented opportunities to me, no? So it was, no, we're doing an exhibition of architecture. Yeah, all these men, no, of recognize other, even older generations. Yeah, but we need a woman, Tatiana. This competition, yeah, for this super important project. Yeah, but we need a woman, no, Tatiana. So all these things that were putting me to places where I didn't belong because of my work, no. It was only because I was a woman. And I must say that for me, and this is totally selfish and almost nonsense to speak about it, but that was a difficulty, no? It's terrible to say, because I mean, if we all had only those difficulties, let them exist, no? So this is why I don't feel so good on speaking about it. But until there were two things that I think were relevant and important during the process of the understanding of that, of me being a woman and being different and being and having an opportunity that happened. The first one was that at the beginning, I really think I dared to be there because I never saw it as a difference. No, so in the first years when I was called to a lecture of anything, the first question was, "And what are the difficulties you face as a woman?" And I would get really mad about those questions, because I thought that it was insultive. First of all, because I never saw myself as different. Second of all, because I thought that by responding, I was discriminating myself and somehow accepting that I was different. But then one of my male colleagues, Derek Telekam, who's also a very interesting, recognized architect in my generation and in my country, put me aside one day and said, "Tatiana, okay, tell me, who, when you were studying, who did you listen as a woman, like they are listening to you?" I was like, which women did you look forward to, and which women did you heard speaking? I was like, Lina Bobardi. And he was like, no, literally someone near you through there. And I was like, no, well, no, that's right, no one. And he said, well, then you have to really make an issue about it. I mean, sorry, but it is on you, and you have to admit that it's different, and that this has not happened, and that you really should be acknowledging it in order to open different channels. So then I saw it completely different, and I started answering, no? And then when I really understood the amount of opportunities that I had because of being a woman, I really started thinking that for me, the role was to start giving those opportunities to others, no, by really advocating for opening these opportunities to hopefully one day arrive to the place where, as Iñárritu said it in this Oscars delivery, that race, hopefully one day race is equal to the color of the hair as it is right now. I hope that gender does the same someday. So I understood that not only I have to be outspoken about it, I have to understand how to create opportunities to those that don't have it, no? Because it's being outspoken about it and being able to speak in forums like these really creates opportunities but for those who already have the opportunities. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you are already a woman here studying at Pratt, although I understand the whole difficulties, and I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying you don't have a lot of struggles to be here, but already that is a privilege. So those who are not able to not even arrive there, and to those speaking, addressing the issue creates a platform of opportunity, but it doesn't open anything else more. So what I decided to do is take kind of the leadership of changing the basis of institutions, of the definitions of aims of businesses, starting from my own business, challenging working laws and these things in Mexico. For example, in Mexico, the maternity leave is 3 months. We have a 6 months paid plus a 6 months with half time working, full salary. For both men and women. In Mexico, it's only for women. No, so you have to start changing within organizations. No, right now we formulated a group to change the Academia de Arquitectura in Mexico, which is the AA. In the US, not the same, but the same, but not the same. It doesn't have the same way of acting and these things, but anyway, it's now set up in a basis, it's defined as a discriminative institution. So we are changing those definitions, and if you don't start to do that in the university, in the faculty of architecture, in those things, you are never going to open the channels for those who don't have the channels. So I think that if you are here right now, take this opportunity. And yes, I also thought that my grandmother fought for it and I didn't have to do it. But then I grew up and I realized that we still have to do it because we're not there.
I can continue with that thought. And speaking about giving a voice to specific communities, this is a little bit on a different topic, but since your studio focuses on designing for critical communities, in a way like allowing specific communities to have a voice in the design process, because of the participatory approach of your studio, how do you balance the client's limitations in the case of affordable housing, the government's limitations, in relationship with the needs and the expectations of the inhabitants themselves?
It's a very difficult struggle because it falls into the line of the law, and the law sometimes is preventing these things to happen, not because it's a conspiration to prevent them to happen, but more because of the system not being designed to allow it. So I think that what I have definitely understood is that I thought of participation as being a tool in a system and a great system, whereas right now I see it as just a label that doesn't enable true social production of habitat. So now I see that it's not about participation. It's not about thinking that they have to participate in the design. It's the other way around completely. I really be benefited myself if I'm able to participate in the process of the society building their space, no? And this is able to be done in many different ways, and there are many different examples all over the world of the social production of habitat happening in different stages, no? It's evidently that in the rural areas is much more easier, no, that the architect become just part of those people getting together to produce their own habitat, no? It's very easy, it's very simple, and it's how it is understood. But in cities and or in environments where a lot of systems, financial, economical, political systems need to be embedded, is more difficult. But there are a lot of systems of community land trusts, of commons, of syndicates that are rising all over the world, that are really being able to exist within the system and still produce their habitats in a social way. And for me, the most interesting examples that are opening ideas for my practice to exist, because definitely there are many ways of doing it, is very interesting examples in Germany. There's a syndicate called the Syndicate of Tenements, and this is how it's translated in English. And they have around 150 units, buildings of different types, of people that get together, are able to, with this syndicate, get finance for buying the land. At the same time, they're challenging the ownership precept in which we live in. And then they are together deciding how to live, no? And what are the spaces that they need? Then they hire an architect if there's not an architect in the group, and then they integrate the architect in the decisions, and not the architect doesn't come to impose the possibility on them. If we think architecture is on itself a colonizing act, so if we are really able to think that we need to allow architecture to exist and not be the architect, I think we will truly be others, no? And the other day I was thinking that we should, what I would like to do, and I haven't done it, and of course I'm the worst example for it, is how to transform society to so inhabitants are those who speak on spaces. And I said this to someone that was interviewing me, and I told him, you know what, you should interview the people who live in the house. I mean, what I'm going to tell you about the house, it's beautiful. It works perfect. No, and look at the pictures I sent the photographer to take. I mean, what is I'm going to say? Better if we architects wouldn't have a voice, and the voice would have the inhabitants, we would produce a society so much better architecture that in truth, because we would definitely understand, how is to live in these spaces, what are these spaces that the built spaces are producing and are doing, instead of analyzing what the architect did or didn't do, and from the perspective of the architect or the architecture instead of the inhabitant. Let's see if that day arrives. I mean, as I said, I'm guilty to be on the other side of the system that I'm imagining that could be really beautiful to exist.
Tatiana, I loved the lecture, especially that idea you just spoke about architecture being something beyond the architect. So what I was wondering is that within academia, especially architecture school, the process is extremely insular, and it's really just like the designer. There's not much communication happening. I was wondering if you've started to try and integrate these ideas of the architect. Like, how would you even go about integrating these ideas of the architect becoming more of like a spectator than the sole practitioner?
Yeah, rather than a spectator, I would say a participant.
Yeah.
One of the actors. And probably not the principal. The principal should be the inhabitant, no? A secondary actor, a support actor. And I think that not only architects should be there as actors supporting the principal. No, I think that there are many other very important aspects. I mean, if we are out by ourselves, we commit the crimes that I expressed in the beginning, right? If we are really alongside people thinking in the production of materials, in the economy of the place, in the social aspect of it, in the relationships, in the in the history of the place, and we really not try to ourselves acquire all those notions to do something, but really bring them to the table, then I think that we are able to produce something, right? But I think that integrating that starts from the beginning. So I have also started to question the way we think that we interpret as a place. And maps define sizes, physical relationships, give numbers, tell us how much, how come, no, and how cold and how hot. Statistics tell us how many people, no, how old they are, but they don't tell stories. And the built environment is about stories that are told and that are going to be told, no? So how to integrate the understanding of the place with a social meaning rather than a scientific method, no? So this is why I also been exploring the method of expression, the collage, as a tool that it's opening possibilities for other things to be integrated, but also to be interpreted in any way from any person, and not being determinant. And I think that if we start being sensible to the place as not only a space but as a story, this way I think we would be much more humble, to act on it, and probably hopefully more sensible to then allow us to think that we could only be participants, and not determinants.
Thank you for that. And sort of to extend on the education aspect, there was a question in the chat about students. I don't know if you wanted to ask your question. If so, you can unmute and ask.
Maybe you can.
Yes, we can also like.
Yeah, I can just read it.
Do you want to read it, Jack?
You can read it. You can read it.
What is the one piece of advice you would give to us as students?
So I think that for me, the advice that I normally give, I think it's still very relevant, is first of all, to never succumb to money. Never violate your principles for any reason, and even less for money. I understand that we all have the necessity of eating, and what I said is that we live in this horrible society that needs to produce in order to exist. But believe me, if you do something that it's going against your precepts for money, you will regret the whole life much more than not being able to pay your bills or having not even to eat, because I understand that you will solve it in a way because you're already here. As I said, we are already in a privileged place. You will solve it all of a sudden. Maybe it's not going to be that comfortable for a little while, but never succumb to that, because this is the way we all get involved. No, well, but I need the money. This client is tricky, but it's paying well. I don't think that you are able to build anything sustainable like that, no? So in my case, I have, there's sometimes that I've been immersed in a situation that I didn't foreseen before. And I've resigned to projects in the way, and it's been painful in some ways, but very liberating in others. And but I definitely have said no much more times than yes, probably. And I think that it is very important to have that always in mind, no? That at the end, yeah, there's a lot of struggles, and I don't tell you that it had been easy, but it's possible. It is possible, no? I also, indifference that what people think. My family were refugees, migrants, teachers their whole lives, so I don't have a bank account that supports me. So yes, and sometimes I had to struggle in many ways, but I am very proud that I can say that every time that I mess it up, because I had for sure, and taken wrong choices, I have been away from them, rejected them, and learned from them and moved to the next. But I would really advise you not to never do anything that goes against your values for nothing, unless for money.
To continue on that, because that starts to get into the next question, so I'll just continue the chat questions. The next one asks, how do you balance your individually motivated works and investigations with the facts that architects depend on getting paid by the clients to keep working and live? How much space for these searches do you find in the client-dependent projects?
So in any project, this is our method. And I think that through the years, we have come also to a place that I would say is also very privileged, where we already, and I'm so very outspoken that people who approach me to work with already know that there is a very strict agenda behind every project. And normally that is what they're looking for. No, so we use use is a very horrible word, but in every work we do, we do all the same processes of researching, of searching, of producing ideas that belong to this place, with these people, with this environment, and this is how we work, no? And yes, as I said, is a struggle, and sometimes you have to put things aside, but always keeping our priorities in, so to invest our time there, no? And you have to shrink, and you have to get big, and you have to do other sacrifices in other areas. But so far, I've been very lucky that I've been very able to always allow to do those things, right? In every project we do, in the smallest or the largest. And much more, it's easier, no? And we have more room right now because we're only looked because of that, no? Mostly. And whereas before, no, like the clients were walking also with us, no, while being like constructing our ideas. So yeah, it's a process of doing it, no? And something that I always say, especially nowadays to younger generations, is that right now we live in a society of 140 characters, no? And things are not built with 140 characters, and a conversation cannot be done with that, no? It takes much longer, and it takes much more time from those 140 characters to be read or done or thought or written, no? And so life is about doing it, being persistent, with a lot of time, a lot of work, and then to be able to be reduced to 140 characters. So don't just go for the 140 characters, go for all the work that needs to be done to get to there.
Yeah, I believe that question was asked by Maria, right? Yeah. I think, where are you from?
I'm from Argentina. I thought it was an interesting question, especially because here I'm gonna go to like the extreme, but there was a time during the dictatorship where, for example, Justo Solsona, who's a very famous architect here, at the same time that he was doing like this huge project for like a state project for the military government, he was teaching a clandestine workshop like at the exact same time. So I thought, at least here in Argentina, usually architects have had like a kind of like a leftist or like socially inclined views. So, especially with smaller studios, like I've had professors from school who have small studios that struggle with that, how many projects to take compared to like individual like searches or interests.
Yeah, well, I don't know the specific case of this architect that you're describing, but for me, it generates a larger problem when you are able to be a tool for an authoritarian system to perpetuate than what you can balance with the clandestine teaching, right? So it's each of us have our own precepts, no? And I would think that for me, I rather be in the clandestine part of the world than on the other one, but definitely not in the both, no? And this is something that is, as I said, very personal, and I don't dare to get into that discussions because I don't know this person and I don't know what the kind of necessities or the problematics or the issues that he had, probably threatening his life even, no? Maybe not, but I don't know. And well, this is how I've been able to live. And as I said, I since the beginning, and speaking about women, but also I get on this, I've been very privileged to be in a place where I don't have to make these decisions, right? So I don't know if I would be there, what would I have to do? But I think we all live in a pretty comfortable life right now in the world, much more than any other moment. Sorry, I should have. And yeah, so I don't know. My grandfather was an architect and was a minister in the government of La República in Spain, and he became when the war was evolutioning. He also was kind of growing in hierarchy in the government of La República, and obviously he was very persecuted after the war was over, and they had to flee to Mexico. And my grandfather, at some point, my great grandfather went to prison where my grandfather was in France to tell him that he had kind of received an unofficial pardon from Franco to be able to return to his country. And my grandfather said, I'd rather live my whole life standing anywhere than on my knees in this country. So I'm never going to go back until the day this guy is gone. So, I grew up with this, but every situation is very different, no? And every human in earth has a totally different condition, so it's very difficult to judge from outside.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. With what we have been talking about and community and life, I think the next question could be the one of Viralis about community. I think that would be a nice question to follow.
Yeah, so As demonstrated in your work, you prioritize community engagement and really empathize with the occupants as well as with those who build and maintain it. So do you ever show these same priorities in your design process? And how do you manage the different participatory workshops given the location and community?
Yeah, so what I explained before a little bit on participatory design, I think I was aware of this the moment where I was able to work with Gabriel Orozco as an artist, that he designed his own house and he invited me to help him build it. And in this process, I understood the importance and the impossibility of architects to really connect with the people that build the spaces, no? And I really understood that there was a very important notion, because especially for me, I came out of school in the 90s, no, mid 90s, late 90s, with a training that was going towards the understanding of software produced spaces, no, really on revealing this world of parametricism and blobs and blebs. And I was obviously turned to be, no, in the trend of the world, and how as in where I was educated and how as I was educated. But then I went and started helping this house to exist, which was a pretty geometric design with a pool in the center. It's based in an observatory in India done in the 18th century. So it was obviously described by geometry and very directly, done. And so in my mind, it was going to be extremely easy to build this thing, relatively, from what I was thinking on my designs, parametric designs. And I realized how hard it was to communicate with the people that were going to build it, even in order to explain how to do a sphere and how to create the mold for the sphere. So I really understood the importance of the understanding of not only the inhabitants, but the hands that are building it. And how do I integrate this? I do integrate that into the analysis part of the project. So one of the parts for us is not, as I said, not only how big is the space, what are the codes that apply, etc. Is who is going to build it, and how is this going to be built. And it's not only about who is going to inhabit it and how it's going to be inhabited, is what is the experience of this. So I integrated that into the analysis part and the understanding of the whole process. And we arrive until the point of really integrating those hands into the possibility of the understanding of the project, by since speaking to them in the beginning of the process of design, but also in the beginning of the process of construction, and doing it through all the process. And I'm never gonna forget the day I was able to integrate the people who are building the aquarium, the Sea of Cortez Research Center, and how there was one guy that was never before in our gatherings, because the group was starting to grow. Right now there are more than 1,000 workers there, and the group was starting to work. There were like kind of 300 that day, and there was this guy in front of me, very attentive of what I was saying. I was explaining the project and how it began and how our idea. And this guy said, "Finally, I understand. I always thought that this was a ruin. It looks like a ruin, but I never thought you really intended to be like a ruin. I love ruins, and I'm gonna keep building our ruin." And like this revelation, which is something that might sound so very simple, was something that made him transmit, the excitement and the possibility of the commitment to the construction of the place, no? So again, building knowledge towards everything and towards integrating many aspects of it.
I think going off of what you just of your answer and talking about communicating this project, I'm curious because I read a decent article on you, and it was said that you banned rendering in your studio. So I'm curious as to what you see in the physical world that gets lost when architects start working in the digital workspace.
Well, you said this in article. I think these sensationalist articles that just look to highlight topics and that are not expressing the full thing is kind of tricky. But anyway, I think that it's not about banning anything for me. No, it's about getting to understand what are the most productive ways of enabling a conversation. So I believe architecture is a language. And so how can we enable conversations with it? And I believe that renders ban the possibility of expanding knowledge and notion of the production of space, because they are very determinative, and they are determining the way people have to inhabit the place, because they don't leave anything to imagination, no? So I understood very early that this was happening, because the first project I did ever, very, very long time ago, it was a house for a very close friend. And I showed him, I was just out of school and I was just learning how to use these tools. And I showed him an image of the design, which was just conceptual. It wasn't just in the conceptual phase. And I showed the image, and then we spoke, we evolved the project in many ways. And it really transformed from that image. One day we arrived at the construction site, and he said, Tatiana, this room is completely changed, and I'm from what the project is. And I'm like, no. And he started describing that render, no? Almost as if, where is the blonde girl, exiting from the room that you put it? Because it was there. And I was like, oh, he really stopped imagining the place because of whatever reason, no? Because we probably also, architects, tend to think that all can read a plan as we do, and we all can interpret a section as we do, but that's not the truth. Not even us, we interpret it the same. So I thought that doing so prescriptive images, also using plans and sections and renders with inhabitants, is very damageful, no? So this is why I started to try to open different ways of communicating with different notions. Every project has its own expression and its own necessity, no? So sometimes we need to enable a conversation on the use of an object within the space, no? So then we think how to do that. If it's a model, if it's a collage, if it's a three-dimensional collage, an oil painting, a sculpture, use of objects to create a model, no? Plates that together create a model. We use different things, different modes of expression in order to create different channels of communication. So as I see that these tools are becoming much more tools of communication, I think I see the imperative necessity of questioning them, no? And yes, obviously, I'm not going to say that it's hyper practical to have found kind of an homogeneous language with plans and sections and elevations and renders to define projects among us, no, and to create the possibility of communicating with engineers in a more straightforward way. But to conceive the projects and to be able to enable a conversation with them, I think we have to rethink and be very careful, no?
I think on the topic of enabling conversations and creating different channels of communication, I wanted to ask you about the multidisciplinary approach and like the importance of collaborations, which you have touched a lot on your presentation and on the questions, but I would like to ask you a little bit more about it. You promote a collective environment in your practice, not only through the collaborations with other architects, artists, economists, and even local governments, but also through participatory design approach, where the inhabitants are part of the design process. So in your opinion, what defines a strong system of collaboration? How has your experience working with other people coming from very different backgrounds shaped your design perspective and how you approach every new project?
So first of all, I think that to collaborate, you need to be an extremely good listener. And you have to be a spectator rather than an actor. You have to become a spectator rather than an actor. And I think that for me, that is a true possible way of collaborating. No, so collaborating doesn't mean I have my ideas, you have your ideas, let's stand together and put them in a piece of paper. That never mostly becomes a collaboration. It's just the sum of two ideas, which is not the same as the the adding of those. No, so I think that for me, the most important part of it is to become a self-reflective listener. No, so to listen to that opposite other and to really digest what they're saying, no, and understand that there is an opposite other and allow that opposite other to exist is very difficult. It's not easy because obviously everything that is said to you, you translate it in your own terms. You interpret it in your own terms. So this is why it's necessary to allow that space to exist by itself. Because if also collaboration doesn't mean that I listen to people and then I go and do my design. No, this is why participatory design set up like that is not social production. No, social production is done by every with the others, and I believe that I don't only believe. No, I've done several projects where that happens, and it's not what people are used to. No, so we in this project in Territorio de Gigantes that I showed a little bit, I invited 5 other offices, so we were 6 offices in total. We were the architects hired to design the master plan, and then I invited these 6 to design the first block as kind of the first step to also inform the master plan. No, so when the architects came to Mexico, the first workshop, obviously we went to the site, blah blah blah. We started speaking, and then I said, okay, let's sit on the table and start thinking what is going to be this block. And everybody, all these architects were saying, okay, what are the limitations? I said, what are the limitations? Can we discuss them? No, Tatiana, but you're doing the master plan. I mean, setbacks, openings, relationships to places. I said, none. We need to describe them. No, but you have already an idea. I said, yeah, there's an idea of the master plan, but this is exactly what I want you in this table, because I want this block to be informative of the rest, not the other way around. So let's start working. Well, okay, but what are your precepts in order to make this block related to the master plan? Like, what are the precepts in order to make this block? And it was difficult at the beginning because there was no one leading, and for them, because we are normally used to do that. And this also happens in my studios, and ask my students. They're always, every single class, very scared because they don't know where this is going all the time, because we are used to be very not directed on what to do. what is very different is that you are allowed to do your own process, and yeah, it's not always straightforward, and yeah, it's not always straight, and it is not always flowing, and it hasn't ever always been like that, and sometimes even if I think it's like that, it is not. But well, this is the ethos behind, and this is the thought of it.
I have a question that kind of relates to this theme of collaboration between different specialties and people. So you mentioned that you see architecture as a platform for society to change. And you also mentioned that your grandfather was an architect and in the government in Spain. And I know that you were an advisor for the Ministry of Development and Housing of the government of the Federal District of Mexico City. I personally see this as a very admirable and responsible example of architects branching out of their design studios into a larger governmental context. How do you think that your experience in the Ministry of Housing helped you form your practice and your architectural discourse? And additionally, what do you think should be the architect's role in the governmental evolution of urban environments?
Oh, this is a difficult question, I must say. First of all, I think that by being able to get within the system, the political system, I understood how difficult is to really understand, how really difficult is to work only for the sole kind of purpose, social purpose, no, that a government should work because of its ties with the economy, the political power, the economical power, the financial power, all these forces that are pulling to other places, right? So I then understood that I think that the most that the more possibilities to really work literally with only one agenda, which is the human being, is not in the government. No, it's really on the private sector, on not public government, because it is never free of all these ties or all these agendas, no, that they have to pursue, and they're normally forces that are contrary to the needs of the society, no. So I think that for me it helped me think on how to operate, no, beyond those forces, and how for governments are how difficult it is. On the other hand, I think what I also learned very much is that there are always two sides of the story, no, and it is not always a conspirational notion, no, that is the government working against us, it's not like that. And there is always two sides of the border, yes, as well, but of the story. And understanding this has made me also able to understand how to navigate, no, within those. And I always remember these what Buckminster said, that I don't never remember the exact phrasing, but it's to make a radical change, you have to work within the system, right? So it's exactly about learning what is the system in order to, on that basis, create the change, no. So this is why I think that being able to learn from that side of the story was very important for me.
I'm going to change the topic a little with my question, but I wanted to hear your opinion on site-specific design. So studying your work, we find social housing projects and prototypes located in different countries, such as Mexico and France, which not only contrast in environmental conditions, but also they present different socioeconomic realities and work conditions, for example, in the construction industry. So my question is, are there things to consider restricting when developing a project in any of these countries? And did you approach improving the basic necessities of both communities differently?
Every approach is different, very, very different, because every place is different, even if they are in the same neighborhood. We are all different people. And I think this I realized very early when and it was very obvious. We made a house for Viviana, a person who lived in Guadalajara, is the third largest city in Mexico. And she lived there, but the house was in Ajijic, which is a small village or town, more weekend area, definitely a weekend house. So we worked with her very closely to develop her house there, and very closely. I mean, she was part of the design. She was delivering designs for us, and it was really interesting process. And so we finished this house 4 years after, and she was very, very happy with it. And I've stayed in this house. We stayed in close contact. I was also very happy with the result because she was very happy. And she was really, truly involved. And we found out, obviously, in the process, very early in the beginning, that she was hyper obsessive person, to the fact that she was asking questions during the design, like, what if the boyfriend, then the to be boyfriend of my daughter, who was 12 at the time and had no boyfriend, is staying with us and is a left-handed person, no? And I was like, really? I mean, really, we have to imagine that? Well, we did, no, because she was super kind of obsessive with every corner of the design. Fine, we made the house, and 3 years after we finished that one, she came back and asked us for her house in Guadalajara, a design for her house in the city, for her everyday house. And I said, of course, Viviana, we now know you so well. We start, and all of a sudden, a new Viviana arose. It was a different Viviana, and it was not just because 3 years had passed or because she had learned of the process. It's because I understood completely that we all imagine and have different imaginaries in different places, no? So her life in the countryside near a lake, she imagined it completely so I then started to understood that we all have very different ways of living, not just because we are different to each other, but also because we imagine different moments of our lives, not only because of the years evolving, passing life, children, no children, no elderly, younger, but also on different conditions of our lives. So there are as many definitions of domesticity as humans being on Earth, but as situations of those human beings on Earth. So there are really infinite possibilities of domestic definitions. And therefore, for me, it's very hard to think that they could be an equal process of nothing. No, everything has its own process and its own definition. And obviously, probably we are learning tools of enabling things or learning about problematics we encounter. And then we have understood that if we go differently, we can work better or these things. But it's about more or less being aware of the tools you can learn from a process and then being able to use those tools in the next one, but not of the process itself, if I explain it well. Yeah, and I don't know if I answered completely the question or I deviate so much that I ended up not answering it. I hope I did.
I think we can go back to a question that came in the chat. Heta Vasquez, if you want to say it yourself, you can. Okay, I can ask. So for the
Yes, I can say it myself. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, first of all, Tatiana, it is amazing to be speaking with you. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I think that everything you do is amazing. I just wanted to ask that maybe for the future time, what advice could you give to students that in the future they're thinking about creating their own studio or their own firm, and around like how many years of professional practice and learning do you think that oneself should have before making this step?
Yes, I think it's a beautiful question. I think definitely for me the notion of the own studio is changing dramatically. No, as I see the much more the possibility for us, maybe not me anymore because I'm beyond there, unfortunately. But for you to operate as a system much more than first as an individual. I mean, I think that that notion of the own firm has been delivered more and more through generations already in my generation. Started to change by the notion of collaborations because this is already something that we need to operate. But I think that for you, for this generation, there is an incredible possibility of becoming part of a system rather than operating as a firm, you know? And I think that this notion really will open a lot of opportunities for you, no? If you are able to be so flexible, to be adapted to a situation where as needed as acting as a firm, but also as a collaborator, but also as a participant in different moments and in different projects. I think that this way is the way how you are going to be able to operate much more than right now thinking of doing a studio with your name. No, I think it's a little bit anachronistic already. No, I already feel that I am outdated, you know, by these people that are able to be so flexible to operate. For example, I have a lot of collaborators within my office that they at some point exist as employees, you could call them, but in the same project, they operate as consultants. And in the next project, they operate as collaborators, you know? So I think that already those things are existing, but I think if you already operate as that, you will really be able to have much more opportunities of doing much significant work, because I think that this notion of the firm and the studio led by a personage is kind of dying. We are dying, those who started our firms like that.
Yeah, I understand. Muchas gracias, Tatiana.
Muchas gracias, Yet.
Tatiana, I believe Sydney wants to stack on the question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be a clear question, so I'm sorry if it's all over the place, but just to, first of all, I dig your work. It's so amazing because I also feel like I would have to disagree with you when you say you're outdated because there's still a lot going back to earlier how our studios are still even taught even supposedly supposed to be like abstract studios, conceptual studios. There's still a very odd Western standardized view kind of being taught. And so my studio actually this year, while I'm also kind of glad to see how you present your work, how you present yourself within your work at the individual, I feel like it's the collaborative, of course, but you have a very intimate understanding because of identity and individual within your collaborative work. And that's why it works so well, because everybody who's involved, you're having them work through that process. So the collaging, I feel, is because we're in my studio, we're doing collaging. And I've noticed there's a different sense of care because of people being able to have their kind of footprint within the type of design and movement that they want to see within their the place that they'll be staying, that they'll be, open the door to, they'll be walking in and moving around. And so I don't know if it's really a question. I just wanted to say I really enjoy how you've been presenting your work. And I don't think it's honestly amazing. I feel like more people should hop onto it, because there is a disconnect between, I feel, when people, they talk about collaborative, they talk about this, that, and the third, but they can't track it. I feel like yours track from the moment that you accept it to when it's finished and 2 years after. And I think that's what is like important about your studio. And so I guess how have you influenced others since you've been doing it for a while, since you've produced like all these, like how have you been able to see it spread in your close proximity of the people that you've been able to call colleagues, as well as the students that you teach? How have you seen them grow in that process?
Well, as I said to that reporter, I think this you should ask them because they'll answer more correctly. But I think that what you were saying, thank you for all your comments, Sydney. I think that one of the things I realized very recently is that probably is because we don't use collage as a way of representation only. We use collage as an understanding on how we do architecture. What we are a collage of people, right? And our architecture also arrives to any given place to be part of that collage that is a context. But also we use it as a process of design, of being able to have a place where ideas congregate, and stick together even though they're opposites, because a collage has that capacity. And I hope that then the result allows this to happen, no? And I think that this is the difference. I don't see it as a way of representation. I see it as a process, and I see it as a way, as an easy way to describe how I am built and what I want to build, So I think that in this case, I think it goes the same for collaboration, no? So it's not only to create an ambience or to open more channels. It's really truly because I believe that that is the only possibility on how to operate. And sometimes even so, because I don't have the capacity in my mind to imagine all these things and to create responsible responses, no, to anything. So I truly believe that I don't have the answers for anything, and I think that it's easier to find more questions together than try to solely think on answers. Maybe this is an answer, but also a comment on what you were starting to build up. But thank you.
Yes.
Sydney.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
So sort of changing the topic a little bit, I think one of the parts of your lecture that really stood out to me was when you were talking about the creation of ritualistic spaces. And I think the images that you showed, the part that I noticed the most, since I'm from Saltillo, so like my family has always been around tile and terracotta. I wanted to ask you, what do you think of organic materials in the sense of creating these ritualistic spaces? What qualities do you see in those organic materials, and how do you balance, cost effectiveness and these qualities? Like, how do you place the importance of it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we can call them organic materials, because that is a word that is difficult to be defined and to be understood the same by all of us. But I think what we can speak of is local available materials, no? And I think that for me, the importance of the materiality relies in the possibility of it being a physical protective material, but also to be a socially interactive element, no? So to be able to enable the aspects of the space that you are trying to build, to create knowledge, to root possibilities, lives, ideas, and to create the possibility of knowledge transmission. So if you use a material that is able to allow you to do hopefully all of those things, but if not, at least one of them, then the material is just doing more than just protecting your physical self from the environment. No, so I think that so then it is when it becomes a language, no, and not just an possibilitate or enabler or whatever you want to call it. And I think that then for me, it is there that the importance of the reliance of it as being more things than just a material definition. It's where the decision comes in, no, and whether it's concrete or bricks or earth or and it's not a formula again, because it might not be enabling any conversations, even if you think, oh, come on, it's earth. No, it needs to, but it probably, if it's not a knowledge that is kind of evolved from the community, if in the community the earth is never used like that, and it has all different precepts and different conceptions, then it's not going to be like that. No, for example, in the reconstruction of the earthquake, our response was, we need to rebuild the houses with the earth there. The earth is just so great in any of its capacities, but guess what? The earth built houses represented for them, first of all, insecurity, because they thought that was the reason why they fell, and which is much more complex than that, but that was really the fear. And second of all, in Mexico, houses built with earth are classified as precarious in the census. So people have live in a house that is done with earth and has not other characteristics, but one of them is being built like that, has a label in his forehead said, I'm poor. So this is very difficult, no? So in these cases, if you build a house on earth with them, you would think that this is the most sustainable possible way of doing, and this is transmitting knowledge and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? It's preventing the society to evolve to that notion, no? So how to integrate the possibility of building with earth, understanding that. So it is very complex, no? And it has a lot of ways of getting into it. But I think that one of the important ones would be, I would say, is it depends on each of the situations.
Did any of the panelists have another question? We can sort of wrap up if we're good. But, okay. Thank you so much for coming. This has been a great chat. A lot of great topics were touched on. And I'll let Valeria and Isa do a goodbye, but I just want to say thank you. And I know you taught me a lot here and touched a lot of other people. Yeah, so we're just so thankful for you to come in.
Yeah, we feel honored to have you here tonight, and like actually, elevating our culture and our background and everything. We're just so happy to have you here. And yes, like Jared said, I learned so much in this lecture, and I really hope to continue like talking about these topics at school and really, communicating these things to our colleagues at school as well. I don't know if any panelist wants to say anything more. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you too. What a great way to end the semester. And for some of us, our undergraduates. We feel so happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure and an honor for me to share my work with you tonight and to be engaged in these interesting conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye. Thank you.